welcome to another Excel demo with Rich Kerr from Apex Training. In this scenario, I'm going to show you how to use the trim range function along with a couple of other helper functions to create a bulletproof calculated column. A very simple data set here. I've got some invoice numbers and some amounts, and I'd like to calculate the sales tax on the amounts. Now, let's say the sales tax is 5%. A very easy way to do that would simply be to say equals B2 and multiply it by 5%. I mean, it could be that simple. You get your calculation, and then you could double click to fill it down, right? Not that difficult. And depending on what version of Excel you have, if you go and add another invoice number in column B and another column A and another amount in column B, the formula will extend itself. But that doesn't always work. I mean, you have to have double click to make it fill down. And then depending on the version of Excel, it may not do that continuation of the formula. Regardless as to what version of Excel you have, if for some reason you need to skip a row or more than one row, let's say I had to skip and go a few rows down, type in another invoice number, another amount, you'll see the formula now does not extend, even though I double click to fill it down. So that double click process to fill the formula down from the top does not extend all the way down to this row that has gone beyond the initial data set. So let's look at how we might be able to bulletproof that process. So I'm going to get rid of this initial calculation. Let's say we're trying to future-proof this worksheet. We don't know how many invoices we might add in the future, or if there might be some blank rows scattered amongst the data. You could start out by saying, well, I'm going to make reference to the entirety of column B, right, and multiply that by 5%. Now, you get a spill error message because it's trying to fit all of column B, each row calculated, but you're starting it in row 2, right? There is a finite number of rows in an Excel spreadsheet. So by telling this cell, hey, take the entirety of column B and multiply it by 5%, it can't spill it or fill that all the way down because you're working with one less row, because in column C, your calculation is starting in row 2, but you're making reference to the entirety of column B. So you just don't have enough rows. You're short by a row. So let's fix that part first. I'm going to use a function called drop. Now the drop function lets you make reference to an array and then drop X number of rows or columns. So I'm going to make reference to column B inside my drop function, but say comma 1, which means I want to drop the first column from, or the first row rather, from column B. And then I'm multiplying all of that by 5%. So now it works, right? I mean, just to make the math easy, let's set that amount to 1,000. And you can see, yes, the 5% would be 50. So it's working because I've dropped one row from the entirety of column B. So then when I start in row 2 over here, I do have enough space to spill it all the way down, and it will just continue. So we've taken care of the first part of our problem, which is making sure that it automatically continues to calculate. But the other part of the problem is I now have all these blank entries, which I don't need. I don't need all those blank entries. I just want it to grow as I'm adding more invoice numbers and amounts. Now, a sidebar, some of you may be saying, why not just put your data in a table which automatically expands? And that's a perfectly acceptable answer in a number of cases. I would even say in most cases. But sometimes you don't want your data structured as a table because you're going to be using it in a context where the table structure is more of a hindrance than a help. So if you want to kind of keep your data in a normal Excel range and not have it in that structured table setup, this is the strategy that you could use. So how do I make sure this calculation, even though I make reference to column B, only works on the values that exist in B? This is where the trim range function comes in. I want to trim this reference to all but row 1 of column B. I want to trim it down to just the used cells. So I'm going to put that drop row 1 of column B inside my trim range function. Now the trim range function will eliminate leading or trailing rows or columns. After referencing the range as that first parameter of my trim range function, if I type a comma, you'll see some options like don't trim any rows, trim just the leading rows, trim the trailing blank rows, or both. The default is both. So if I had blank rows at the top of this range and at the bottom, which we know we have blanks at the bottom, they'll both get trimmed off. So since that's the default, I don't need to specify anything. So I don't really need that comma. I'll put a closing parenthesis, and now you can see the calculation stops where the data stops. The trim ranged has trimmed the reference to this entirety of column B, again, minus the first row, but it's dropped all these trailing blank rows. And that also improves performance. There's over 1 million rows in each column, 1,048,576. So I don't need to do millions or over 1 million rows of calculations. I only have 14 rows of data. So now if I add another invoice right below, of course, this formula extends because the trim range function now expands to include this new row. Now again, we saw that earlier. If I double clicked to fill that formula down for sales tax, often it will continue to extend unless something like this happens. Let me skip to row 18 and add a new invoice number, and we'll add a new dollar amount. And you can see that the formula in C continues to extend down. And of course, there's just a 0 because there's no values in row 17. So that one's blank, but it does extend down. So now this formula is bulletproof. It will continue to extend. You don't have to do any additional dragging down of the formula. And even if I skip rows, even if I go way down here and add another invoice number and another dollar amount, the formula will continue down. A side note, notice my custom formatting does not continue automatically where I have those leading zeros in front of the invoice number. Of course, I could fix that by selecting that cell that has the format and tapping the format painter and applying it here. So that'd be one solution. But in terms of the formula in column C, we're now set up so that it dynamically extends and we don't have to use old school methodologies like dynamic named ranges that are defined with offset or index functions. I hope you find it useful. Please check in again soon for more Excel demos with Rich Kerr at Apex Training. Have a productive day.